Hey everyone, Walter Crosby with Helix Sales Development, your host of Sales and Cigars. Today's our series of how to think about sales with Nate Tutas, and we're starting a new series where we're going to talk about coaching and how we do coaching, why we should do coaching, how it's different than training. So we kind of set the stage today, and we're breaking these up into two pieces where we talk about the fundamentals, and then we take a little break, and then the subscribers will be able to catch the second half of this where we dive into the get a little deeper. So go grab a cocktail, grab a cigar, strap in for another impactful episode of Sales and Cigars. So, Nate, welcome back to the How to Think About Sales series. I appreciate you taking some time.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's been a while.
Yeah, well, we missed one. I got in some trouble from my producers about where's Nate? I'm like, well, he's off in Florida getting some training to make him smarter, so he sounds better on the podcast. I was off just not paying attention to what I'm supposed to be doing. So let me frame this up for the audience. We're always talking about how to think about sales and how business owners and salespeople should be contemplating their roles and what they should be doing, and we want to make them think. So we want to do here for the next couple episodes is to talk about coaching, because it's one of the things that I think there's a lot of misnomers. I think there's a lot of confusion. I don't think it's done very well. We have data from the Objective Management Group that shows that most sales managers suck at it. We also have data from places like Gartner and other McKinsey, other large research firms that say that salespeople actually want coaching. They want help and support, but they don't want the sales manager to come in and be what Mike Weinberg would call be the hero, right? And that's what sales managers do, is they come in and try to close the business and, take some of the glory, when they'd be better served by helping that salesperson struggle to learn and allow them, for him or her, to get better at closing. Is there something else there that we should talk about to kind of frame up this next few episodes?
I think that's a good way to start it off. I think the other thing that I would share is just, and we had talked about this in kind of the preamble a little bit, is the formula for performance, which comes out of one of the original coaching books, The Inner Game of Tennis. The formula for performance is literally potential minus interferences. So coaching in and of itself, there's a delineation in it. It's kind of a muddy line depending on who you talk to, but there's a big difference between training and just more in-depth training and the actual art of coaching, which is what I would refer to as that ability to first identify the interferences and then to help the individual actually overcome or eliminate those interferences so that they can unlock the potential that they have within themselves.
And that's a really good way to frame up coaching, because I was reading an article today about somebody that had his helicopter was shot down in Vietnam, and he ended up captured in Hanoi. He was there for 6 years, tortured, and just solitary confinement for 6 years, and they tried to break him, and he survived, obviously, because they were interviewing him. But one of the things that I took away from this interview was, he said, we all have the potential to do what I did. We all have that strength. We just don't realize it because we're never tested.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that speaks to the performance piece of this. We have so much more potential than what we realize. We're able to do so much more than we think we can. So it's that, as you said, that interference that gets in our way. And that interference can be beliefs. It could be what's going on in your environment, those distractions, and where we make excuses for things. That interference can be just about anything, but it's mostly, I would say most of it is in our own head, between our ears and behind our eye. And I think as we talk through this, we can unpack some of that. But you brought up a point that I think we should put on the table. We're both in the sales development space of people, you more than me on an individual personal team level because of your skill sets. And I'll frame it up like this. I don't believe in sales training the way that our industry does sales training. And what I mean by that is, I think people do sales training to feel like they did something. If you're a business owner, like we'll do a little training and everybody will be good. And I think our industry proliferates that mindset, and because it's profitable for business development consultants, it's profitable to do training, but it's a waste of time and money if it's not done in an environment where it's going to be supported. This is just my not so humble opinion. I mean, I've seen people train 10 salespeople, leave the sales manager out, and then fire 5 of the salespeople 2 days after the training was done. Let me just money away.
Yep.
Right. And then the 5 people that are left, the sales manager had no idea what was done. And he's given no framework or guide to help, support the salespeople. And what a sales manager should be, and another belief of mine is that we should be spending 60% of our time as a sales manager doing some sort of coaching, lots of different kinds. So that was my little rant. You want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think a lot of companies, both big Fortune 100 companies, because I've seen it done in those level of companies, and also smaller companies as well, would save themselves a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of effort if every training that they did, whether we're talking sales training, we're talking human resources training, we're talking whatever it might be, also had to come with an implementation plan that the manager had to share up to their higher level leadership of, this is the training that we're doing. This is the dates that it's taking place. And here's my implementation plan of how I'm going to follow up from a sales context. Here's how I'm going to be coaching my team in the field, asking them questions around these specific elements, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the refresher that we're going to be doing, whatever that might be. But just simply asking the manager, hey, what's your plan to follow up on this training that we're investing in? I think would have huge implications for a lot of companies, because so many times a training occurs. And one of my favorite examples of it that we see every year, and I'm sorry for anybody that this is a major source of income for them, but annual sales kickoffs. How many times does an annual sales kickoff happen? You have big people come in, there's a rah-rah speech, they get everybody excited and everything. And then 3 months later, 3 weeks later, maybe even 3 days later, you say, hey, what was so-and-so's talk about when they were up on stage? No idea. They were really exciting.
It was very inspiring.
Got
a lot of energy.
Even taking, hey, cool, these are the speakers we have coming in for our annual kickoff. What's the plan to implement this over time? What's our plan to make incremental progress? What interferences are they addressing? And then how are we going to help the individuals on the team to actually eliminate those interferences or overcome those interferences so they can unleash more potential within the business and within themselves?
Wouldn't it be grand if the people providing that training, that workshop, that kickoff speech, whatever it is, when they explained the training and offered the syllabus or agendas or whatever they were going to do, that they included an implementation plan for that sales leader, for that CEO, whoever was doing the hiring? Wouldn't it be great? It's like, here's what we recommend that you do on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis to make this sticky, because you can't just rely on your salespeople to go do their thing, right? They're going to go out and do what they do. They're going to they're like water. They're going to take the path of least resistance.
Yep. I think so. The only thing I would add there is I think there has to be a shared level of ownership. So I think there has to be hey, we have a guidebook or a framework that we recommend, but we want you to come up with what that implementation plan is going to be. Right.
There's blanks in that worksheet, right? Like, you got to do this. Who's doing what by this date? And then what's the context we're going to do this in? You're going to do role plays here? Are you going to do this as a group? Is it going to be individually? How is this going to be rolled out? Is there supplemental reading that needs to be done? All of that. I think that would create a plan that whoever's paying for it, the CEO, the business owner, would have some way to come back and, as you said, did you do this thing here? But what happened? Why did this get done? Like, you spent, $75,000 and you're not doing your thing, because accountability.
Yep. I was going to say, I think there needs to be that co-created, co-developed plan, right? Implementation plan. And then I think even depending on the size of the company, right? If the CEO is also the sales manager, then they have to do kind of all of it. But I think if you have a CEO or even a CRO that then has VPs of sales or sales managers or whatever, I think every step up the chain, there needs to be an implementation plan that, like, let's say it was a case where you were the consultant and you were working with a sales manager, you help to co-develop that, but then you also go to that CEO and you say, okay, here's on a quarterly basis, based on this implementation plan, here's what those conversations should sound like from your perspective to figure out if the training's taking, if more coaching needs to be involved, if we need to pivot, if this, if that. And that'll actually give you a good benchmark as far as one, the value that your company, the ROI that you're getting from the actual training itself. But then that'll also give you a good understanding of how much ownership the sales leader is taking at really eliminating interferences and helping to unlock potential within the team.
I mean, this is a really simplified way of looking at it, but that business owner, that CEO who's, funding this endeavor is sort of like a parent. Like, you authorize them to do the thing and you've given them the guidance and they've got a plan, but you still got to come in and check on and make sure that they're doing the thing that they're supposed to do, whether they're playing with crayons or, putting them in the coloring book or, coloring on the walls, right? That's their responsibility to come back and make sure, because it is their resources.
Yep.
So that framework, I think, kind of tees up what the difference between training and coaching, and how training will fail no matter what, even if it's not the rah-rah kind where somebody spends like a 12-week program or 6-month program that we're going to train them on a particular topic. If that's not supported, it's just going to fail, especially if it's not embedded in the culture. It should be talked about at sales meetings. It should be talked about at the coffee pot. I mean, it's the language that is there. And if it's not coached, it's not going to become language.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. If it's not implemented, if it's just a process that people go through, they sit in the class for a little while, they take the learnings, some implement it on their own, some don't, your return on investment from that type of training is flip a coin, depends.
It's about luck. All right. So let's think about the coaching component, and maybe we stick with the implementation piece as to like what that looks like, because the book I put together, there was an accompanying workbook that came with the workbook went to the CEO, and part of the book goes to the sales leader. Like, this is what I need you to do. And then the other part they hold on to make sure there's accountability for the thing. So like, not only does the CEO told, here's what you're asking him to do, here's why it's important, and here's the 6 questions that you ask them on a monthly or quarterly basis to see if there's progress. I mean, that's the essence of an implementation plan, and adds a little accountability for that. That works easier for a smaller company. What other thoughts, or what have you seen as it relates to implementing a training program with the appropriate amount of coaching?
I think one of the big things is understanding what the core elements are that need to go into it, right? So like you mentioned a couple of things, role playing being one of them, having remedial training sessions where you actually go through and you do a little bit of reminder training to make sure that the team actually has it down, going through some of that stuff. I think the other thing is being able to walk through situations and really understand that. So if you're the executive leader and you're going to the sales manager, I think part of it is understanding, okay, I don't need to develop the plan. I just need to know that there's a plan in place, and what does the plan consist of, right? And understanding if your sales leader comes back and there's about that much role play, you probably need to have a conversation with the sales leader around what their mindset is around role playing, and understanding how that role play is effective or not, because maybe the sales leader needs some training on how to do effective role plays, right? You can identify a situation right there.
They need training and coaching to be able to navigate that and to get out of their own way, because they're bringing their own baggage about role playing. I think it's the most effective tool out there for getting something to be ingrained in somebody's brain. It's uncomfortable, but the way I position it with people is, do you want to screw it up in this environment where it's safe and we can work through it, or out there where it costs you $10, $20, $30,000, which is better? I'm not exactly nurturing when it comes to coaching, but
I don't think the best coaches are very nurturing, if I'm being honest.
the ones I've had, they're not nurturing.
Mhm.
I've been accused of being an old school football coach from various folks, because I care. I want somebody to improve. That's my measure of success, is that enhancement, that growth, getting closer to performance potential. But there's sometimes we just can't coach people who don't want to grow. We just coach them out. So having that implementation plan, it's got to be like collaborative with a group of people. And I think including salespeople in that implementation. If you got a senior salesperson, it's like, hey, here's what we're planning on doing. Here's our plan. What have you experienced? What do you think we're missing? And if you got somebody with a good mindset and open-minded, you're going to get their buy-in, because they're part of that process. And getting somebody in the room that's on your side makes life easier, because you're always going to get challenged.
So I think one thing to point out as well is that if performance is potential minus interferences, that goes all the way up and down, for lack of better terminology, the chain of command, right? So as the executive leader, whether you're a VP or whether you're the CEO or whoever that might be, you need to be identifying the potential in the sales leader and the interferences that they have that are holding them back from reaching their full potential as a sales leader, as a sales manager. Likewise, that sales manager needs to be identifying potential in the team and identifying interferences that are holding them back. Right. So I think also having an understanding of what are the potential interferences, if we were to categorize that in a way, right? Is it skills that they just need training on some of the skills itself? Is it will? We talk about will to sell and in OMG and things like that. Is it the actual desire that they have? Is that an
Or
interference?
the lack of it?
Right. Lack thereof as well. What are the things that are actually holding them back and identifying that? And then in a way, kind of keeping a scorecard on each person that reports to you to say, this is where I think their potential is at. They're outstanding. They're incredibly intelligent. They've got this, they've got this. Maybe there's a mindset issue. Maybe it's they don't know how to do, go back to the example of role play. I think if more sales managers actually knew how to do role play effectively, they would actually enjoy it and they would have fun doing it because they're not having to then be the Superman and, open up the shirt and, have the Superman cape come out on sales calls. They can actually revel in the fact that they role play the scenario with a salesperson before they went on a sales call. They pre-call planned it. They role played with it. The salesperson went in. They asked the questions they were supposed to ask, and the salesperson's coming out, and you've experienced this. I've experienced this. Salesperson comes out of the call and goes, wow, that was really cool. I was nervous when I asked that question, but when I asked it, I was amazed how the customer opened up and shared this information and that information. I never thought we'd know who this was or that person was, and we got the sale. I think if they knew that, but it comes down to, again, the skill of a coach is being able to, one, identify the interferences, and then two, help to eliminate them.
And I mean, you reference objective management group and the tools that we have, just being able to find the strengths and weaknesses, because we all have them, right? If we can look at that data and say, that's going to be a challenge to fix, like that person has to recognize it's a challenge, and then they got to be like, okay, I need to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is such an advantage for that sales manager or whoever that's doing the coaching to be able to get inside their head. I mean, you have the skill set of NLP to be able to look inside somebody's head without the x-ray, just by listening and talking. But for those of us who aren't trained, that's just a tool that to me is invaluable. If I know somebody has a high need to be liked and they have trouble talking about money, I know they're going to struggle with certain skills. And it's not that they can't learn the skill, is that they can't get out of their own way to be willing to learn it because of some things that are stuck in their brain. And that becomes the coach's job, to get rid of that interference, as you say.
Yep. Well, and I mean, if you think about it from the perspective of a client, so to speak, right? A CEO going, why do I need to invest into this tool? Why should I invest in a tool like OMG? And I'm going to go on a soapbox here for a second for assessments and the validity behind them and all that kind of stuff. It's a shortcut to identifying interferences. That's all it is, right? It's a snapshot in time. It tells you at this moment in time when this person took this assessment, evaluation, whatever you want to refer to it as, here were the interferences that were holding them back from reaching the limits of their potential, right? Now, it's up to the individual to determine what that potential is. I personally think, aside from certain physical limitations in our potential, right? I'm 5'5". We were talking earlier about 175-pound dumbbells. I'm not doing flies, pec flies with 175-pound dumbbells.
Well, not more than once.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's certain physical potential limits, but I honestly believe one of the great things about humanity is that we have unlimited potential from the psychological perspective, right? We're infinitely intelligent if people will actually just have the belief and faith in themselves and the faith in the others that they can actually unlock that potential, right?
Let's just stop listening to dumb people and social media and start, realizing that they have unlimited potential. It is really, we have no idea what we're capable of as a species, even, right?
Right. Prime example, kind of somewhat personal example. I have my father-in-law has dyslexia, right? And he was told as a kid that he was stupid because the teacher didn't know how to A, identify that, and then B, work with it. So really, was that his fault? No, that was the teacher's fault for, in their defense, being ignorant of it, because at the time it wasn't very well known. But now we know that actually that's a skill set that he has, and it just was being applied in the wrong way. So you look at the potential that someone like that has. I mean, he can do things mechanically in his brain where he can literally take apart an engine, figure out what's not working, and figure out how to fix it in milliseconds. And you go to me, I didn't learn that way. My brain isn't wired the way his is. So do I have the potential to get to that point eventually? Yeah, probably with practice and figuring out my own self-limiting beliefs and working through some of that stuff. Sure. But he has a
And
natural gift in that area, right?
but we're sort of stuck. I mean, you nailed something with the educational community. Like years ago, everybody was labeled for something that they didn't fit what somebody wanted. And I don't think that's just with the education community. It happens today in the sales development and the sales organizations that there's certain assumptions made.
Yep.
There's things that aren't discussed that should be discussed. There's fear
Mm-hmm.
that get in the way. There's all of the stuff we're taught as children, like, get in our way, right? If we believe them,
Yep.
shouldn't talk to strangers, right? Well, I learned that in college. Is like, I'm not supposed to go talk to strangers. Like, well, she's kind of hot and interesting to me, and she's a stranger. I need to go talk to her, right? That was
Mm-hmm.
how I unwound that silly little belief. I think there's the idea that I think this thread that we can carry through these conversations is coming back to the performance minus interference. And, those show up in strengths and weaknesses is in OMG assessments and data findings. But the other thing that I think we're going to need to unwind is that sales managers don't know how to do this. And it's not their fault because they were never coached most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
They were never coached. They were never given the insights that they needed. And it's sort of like, you allow your child to run around the house during dinner and come in, grab the little chicken nugget off the table, and then run back out and go do something and run around. And then you take them to a restaurant and you expect them to sit there like a little person, right? If we haven't set the expectations, and as an industry, we're just bad parents. Corporate America doesn't have that desire to put in the coaching because, I mean, if you just think about athletes, they expect to be coached. Even the top athletes, they don't necessarily like it. And it varies a little bit from sports, but guys that play soccer with a round ball, I mean, they expect to be coached. Mm-hmm. And challenged. But in corporate America, it's not the expectation. And so salespeople, like, I know what I'm doing, leave me alone. Yep. Sort of the attitude.
Yeah, and I think this is going back a little bit to the education thing, but I think one of the things that Dr. Bandler has said, for those of you who don't know, Dr. Bandler is a co-founder of neurolinguistic programming of NLP. But one of the things that he said that sticks out in my mind so much, and it applies to what we're talking about here, is that tests, everybody thinks tests are for the kids, right? Tests are not for the kids. The tests are for the teachers to see how well they actually taught the kids. So if a kid does poorly on a test, then it actually reflects poorly on the teacher, not necessarily on the kid. Now, you could say, well, there's how much did the kid study and have discipline to go into those kinds of things. But really, it's how effective was the teacher at actually getting the lesson across to the child to be able to process. If you then take that and fast forward that into the sales world, right? How effective the salesperson hitting their numbers, hitting their goals, hitting their objectives, how effective was the company at teaching that salesperson the sales process that was in place, et cetera, to help them achieve results? And if the answer comes back, well, we don't have a sales process, then we've identified a problem. We've identified a major interference. If it comes back, well, we put them in a classroom and we trained them on the sales process, in the first week that we hired them, and then we expected them to go out and sell. Again, we have feedback. There's interferences there that are holding them back. Like, you can take that and apply that at so many different points throughout various different companies and different stages of growth and whatnot, figure out what the interference is, work on that interference to eliminate it. And if companies just chipped away at those interferences over time, the potential is unlimited from that perspective. But
the magnitude of
me on the
change
soapbox.
the magnitude of change would be astronomical. So I think that's a great place to land this. As we go through this, if make sure you subscribe. We send these out on a monthly basis when Nate and I get together. These drop on a Thursday. We're going to continue this conversation because I think it's, from a sales management perspective, it is the Achilles heel that they don't have the skills to do this. And they need help. And the idea that training can replace it is flawed. And the model that we're working with here is so simple. And there's so many tools to help us identify those interferences and to understand when those interferences are. This is going to take a couple of days, or this is going to take Atlas rolling the rock up the hill on a daily basis. Or Atlas didn't do that. Insurmountable.
Yeah. What's his name?
He's Greek, right?
Yeah.
Atlas was the guy that held the world on his shoulders.
Atlas was the one that held the world. Yeah. I'll remember it.
As soon as we stop recording.
Yep. Oh, well, Google it by the time we stop recording.
Yeah, somebody can chime into the comments in the YouTube channel. Yeah. So I think the other thing I want to say here is that there's in the show notes, we'll have all of Nate's links. So if you want somebody to coach your ass off, Nate's going to help you if he believes you want to be helped. He doesn't just work with any old anybody that you got to have a desire and commitment to get there. I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I think that's something that people should take a look at personally or sales wise, right? I think that's an important factor. Anything else before we land?
Well, the only thing I would kind of wrap up with is, sometimes I've had conversations with people that if you look at the future of coaching and some of the projections that there are, there's a belief that in not too long from now, every company, especially every company in the Fortune 500 and above, will have coaches on staff within the company. And I think one of the reasons for that is exactly what we're talking about right now. Imagine if there was someone in your company that their sole role was to identify interferences, put a plan together to eliminate those interferences, and unlock the potential in whatever group that was, whatever team that was, whatever department, etc. Right? Think about that incremental growth that would occur. And that's where, when I have conversations with people where they're like, why does a company need a coach? Why would someone need a coach? It's because as humans, we have a tendency to fall into that homeostasis, that state of comfort of, not wanting to improve, not wanting to move forward, or maybe not even, it's not a lack of not wanting, it's not even knowing, right? It's
Not
we get
knowing how.
distracted. Yeah. So having that outside influence who can say, hey, we've identified an interference, let's eliminate that so you can move forward. Again, to your point, if there's a will, if there's a desire, as they say, where there's a will, there's a way. And when you have someone that can help to identify those things, then that potential gets unlocked and, sky's the limit.
100%. And to that idea of a coach in the company, there was a show, I think it's still on, called Billions.
I think it's in its final season now.
Yeah. I watched the first couple of seasons and then it got weird and I let it go. But that psychologist was effectively a coach for his team. And she unwound a lot of things and made those guys more money than what she was being paid because they're all messed up, right? We're all messed up in some way. It's just how functional can we be? Getting support, getting some help with coaching is not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength. Humble opinion. All right, Nate, till next month. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.